You can buy piping, but you can also make your own using cord and bias binding. To start with, you want to iron the bias binding flat. And then once you've done that, just use a few pins just to put the cord inside the bias binding. And I've switched over the machine foot from a whole foot to a half foot. There's a screw on the left of the foot just there. And then you want to put the edge of the foot right up against the cord. And stitch along the entire length of the piping. Once you've done that, you put the flat edge against the edge of the fabric that you're using. And when you get to the corner, to enable it to turn around the corner easily, you're going to snip from the outside right up to your stitching. Go as close as you can without actually cutting through it. So I've done a few snips there just to get around the curve. Then when you've done that, you can pin that in place. At the other end here, I've got a right angle, so I'm going to snip into that again. So again, going right up to the stitching without going through it. And then pin it on, trying to keep that as square as possible. You'll see once this is finished, it's not actually going to look too different to the other end of it. And that's because this piping is really thick. So bear that in mind. If you wanted to have a really sharp corner, you might want to use piping that's slightly thinner. So I've done a stay stitch around the edge. That's 5mm from the edge of the fabric. And that's just to hold it in place. And then I'm pinning my other fabric on top. So when you've done that, use the half foot again to stitch all the way around it. And this time you're going as close as you can, right up against the edge of the piping. So on that corner that's stitched there, I'm going to snip through. So I cut at a 45-degree angle, then chop off any excess that you can, so that the corner isn't very bulky. And then when you turn it through, you've got that finished sample. So joining piping, you do this if you're making a cushion or anywhere that you want to have continuous piping going around the outside of it. So I'm just snipping this in half so that I can then join it back together. So I've done the first two steps that I did last time, but I'd left the end of the piping open. So I'm going to cut the cord so that the two ends of it meet. So when I've got it to the length that I want, I can fold over the length of the longest side of the bias binding, and that will fold back over the top of the extra part. So where I've done that, I can feel that that side's just a little bit too long. So I can open it up again and just trim off the excess little part there. So that's the right length now, so I can fold over the end of this bias binding. And I can pin it in place. Then I'm going to do a stay stitch again, just over the part that's not stitched down. So I'm using a contrasting thread so that you can see the difference, but you'd want to do something, do that in something that matched your fabric. So again, pin your other piece of fabric on top. And use the half foot stitch right up next to it. There you go, that's your finished join.